And I'm thrilled to welcome two amazing alums today. Real quick, if you're on Zoom and you'd like to submit a question, please put that in the chat. Or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, feel free to put that in the comment section, and we'll get those questions to the panelists as well. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to welcome two amazing creative entrepreneurs. Justina Blakeney, designer, author, founder of Jungalow, an interior design firm, home decor firm, kind of all around Jungalow ethos, I would say, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And Natasha Case, the CEO and co-founder of Coolhaus Ice Cream, which is a premium ice cream brand based in LA and possibly the most delicious ice cream out there. So I am really excited to invite both of you to this conversation. And I think we just jump right in. So I'm sure you've both done a lot of these conversations, and you're usually asked to start with kind of the origin story of your business. And I definitely want to get to that part, but I want to start even earlier and ask both of you about your time at UCLA, what you studied, and at that time, what you thought maybe your career path might be. Either one of you can just jump in.
All right, I'll go. Hi, welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm Justina, and I went to UCLA. I started undecided. I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go. I thought maybe communications. Took a few different classes and then heard about a weird little department called WAC and thought, this sounds like me. So I was a world arts and cultures major. I ended up minoring in Italian as well. And what I loved most was that I was really able to do a little bit of everything, which is something that I always like to do, sort of like dip my toes in lots of different places. And I studied a year abroad in Italy as well. So, gosh, I learned a lot. I think one of the things I was most excited about was the sociocultural anthropology classes. And I think that a lot of the anthropology classes that I took really informed and continue to inform a lot of my work today. Looking at things from etic and emic perspectives, thinking about how to think about how people live and how I live and how everything is through my lens, and all of that work really sort of started in the World Arts and Cultures program at UCLA. Another thing is that the girlfriends that I made while I was there are still my best friends today. So it's pretty awesome for that reason too, just friends for life, so.
Awesome. So let's see, my connection to UCLA goes back pretty far. Actually, my dad was one of the first like architecture master's classes. I think it was the early 70s. And then UCLA was also my first job. I was on the ball. I was one of the ball girls for the UCLA women's basketball team. So it was the first thing I ever was paid for. So my dad had to open a bank account for me so I could get my $15 for the game. And then fast forward, but it's, it's like one of those things is like multi-generational connection. Fast forward, I went to UCLA for grad school after studying architecture and minoring in Italian as well at Berkeley. Justina and I have in common. Yeah, yes, the big bear as opposed to the Bruin. So I went to UCLA for grad school, therefore knowing what I would study there because I, applied directly into the Masters of Architecture program. And what I would say is, I think I've always kind of enjoyed the idea of like change from within. Like I was really drawn to studying architecture because I felt it would be a great way to kind of acquire a range of skills that then I could kind of break apart and use in a different way, or kind of translate to so many different aspects of how we live and what we do and how we process information and how we communicate. So I think I always saw, the kind of, breadth that it could have, especially because I came from a family, my dad is a practicing architect. So I saw, more traditional application. And so I thought, I'll learn, I believe you have to learn how something's done to then question it. So I'll go through the process and then kind of see where that takes me. And I started to, I think do what I could to push the envelope in school, I became drawn to combining food and design actually at the very end of undergrad and then all through graduate school. And I would try to like weave food into different projects that I was doing. I have to say, I think I did it pretty unsuccessfully at UCLA. I just don't think people were buying it. I mean, I would kind of also do food meets design projects on the side, kind of out of studio, and maybe those were more successful. But I think it does show you that it's okay if kind of in the academic world, you know, things aren't, it's if you feel out of place or you feel like maybe it doesn't belong, sometimes that's a sign that you actually should continue to nurture the idea, and then it will find legs outside of school. Because I think, you know, I don't think, you know, like that it was, I was more glad to then have the skills that I had rather than, you know, kind of develop this whole new idea within school like I ended up doing after. So yeah, that's was pretty much my time at UCLA, and now I've been enjoying being on the UCLA Arts Board as well. So that's where I met Jane. So lots of different moments of connection.
Yeah, and I will say it's been fantastic having Natasha on the board to have your perspective as an alum and as someone who's got a really booming creative business. So appreciate that. Okay, so now that we know kind of your education beginnings with UCLA, I'd love to hear from both of you about the kind of origin of your businesses. A lot of people have been writing questions previous to this, and one of the big things that they've asked is both kind of the inspiration, how did you take this interest into business, but then kind of specifics. Did you bootstrap it? Did you get funding from outside? Was there capital? Kind of what were some of those nuts and bolts, if you can just share along with the story of how you developed your companies and your brands? I think people are really interested in that kind of detail as well.
Cool. Well, I guess it's my turn. I ended up after UCLA moving to Italy, and I stayed there for 7 years. And that was actually my first toe dip into being an entrepreneur. I ended up opening up a little store there, totally bootstrapped. I was with my sister Faith, who's also a designer. And we made a lot of stuff. We found vintage stuff. We traveled all around, and it was like a little bottega. It was like a little kind of hole in the wall type of spot, but so fun, totally financially unsustainable. Like, you know, it was like we were just making enough money to live there and be there and hang out in Italy for the time that we were there. And it was a very magical experience in so many different ways, just to stay in Florence for that many years. And I learned a lot. And I think when then I moved back to the States in the early 2000s, I had gone through the process of being an entrepreneur in a country where they really don't support entrepreneurs very much. It's very difficult to start something over there. It's just not really part of the culture the way entrepreneurism is here in the United States. So coming back to the States, having had that experience, I felt like I was kind of a leg up, and knowing that I wanted to work in the design world, but not knowing exactly how, I ended up realizing that experience that I had in Italy kind of took me far as it had a lot of cachet in the design world. If I said, oh, well, I lived in Italy for 7 years, all of a sudden, like I got somebody's ear, as opposed to, you know, all these other things where it was like I was knocking on doors and no one was answering. So I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with myself. I had a few ideas. I knew I wanted to be creative every single day. I knew that I liked being my own boss, and that I had difficulties whenever I was working sort of in a larger corporate setting. I knew that setting was not for me. And then beyond that, I really didn't know. I loved to write. I loved photography. I loved fashion design. I loved home decor. I did graphic design. Like I was just kind of a Jane of all trades. And after Italy, I spent 2 years in New York, really working all sorts of odd jobs and struggling, trying to figure out my place. I was in my late 20s by this time. And after the 2 years in New York, I decided to move back to California, which is where I'm from, here in Los Angeles. And I really started just doing client work, getting whatever kind of creative job I could figure out. And so I was doing interior design. I was designing logos and doing graphic design. I was just saying yes to anything and everything that landed on my plate just to see. I even was like working as a costume assistant on a TV show for 6 months. So I was just really trying out all these different things. And really, it was at that time where I decided I wanted to start chronicling all these creative adventures that I was going on. And that's when I decided to start my blog. And that was in 2009. And I was living in this tiny little bungalow in Los Feliz, and I had banana print wallpaper up on my walls and tons of plants. And that's where the name Jungalow was born, was hanging out with some girlfriends on the sofa, drinking wine. And everyone was like, God, it's so cute in LA how they have all these little bungalows here, and yours is like a jungle bungalow. And we were like, yeah, it's a jungalow. You know, I gotta love a good portmanteau. So that started my blog, and I just started chronicling these adventures, and little by little by little, my audience started to grow. And little by little is like 5 years. So 5 years of blogging every single day and doing client work. My audience began to grow, and slowly started doing branded partnerships with larger brands. And the more my audience grew and the larger my partnerships got, the more notoriety I got. And parlayed that into a book deal, did my book, The New Bohemians. That book became a New York Times bestseller. And after that, things just kind of skyrocketed from there. And I own 100% of my company. I've bootstrapped the entire thing. I have a very incredible team of 4 women who help me as well. And so we're quite small, and we do a lot. We run the design studio side of the business, as with all the product design and development that we do, the online shop, as well as all the social channels and all the marketing and the books. And I have another book coming out next year. And so, yeah, it's been interesting. We are at the place now where we are getting approached for people who are interested in investing in the company. And so that's a discussion that we're having internally at this point, if that's something that we're interested in doing. For me, as I mentioned, I really enjoy being my own boss. And so I definitely am a little trepidatious about the idea of having investors, because I do want to keep control over my company as long as as long as I'm working here. I want to be the boss. So, but yeah, that's where we're at right now, and just been really incredibly fortunate and to see steady growth, and to continue to see that even in these more difficult times.
That's great. And I'm very excited to hear you've got another book coming out, because I loved your earlier two. So that is going to be great to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's see. So yeah, I became well, a bit of my light bulb with kind of what I wanted to, the direction I wanted to take my interest was actually happened in one of my architecture studios at Berkeley, which was a professor criticized a scale model that I had made, and so he said it looked like a layer cake. And I thought, why is that bad? Layer cakes are delicious. So I ended up baking the next version of that model as a cake. It was my only all-nighter in all of architecture school, which is another story. But I think I just basically couldn't put it down, because I realized this would never get old to me. Combining food and design it's just two of my passions. And I think also when you can kind of bring in multiple passions, that is what makes you unique, gives you a unique point of view, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. Of course, that's going to be, even more kind of specific to you. And I just thought, there's so much to explore here, so much white space. And I could also see when I started talking about food and design with my colleagues, like this, presenting this model made of cake, they were way more interested than anything I had done, all year. It's just, food is memorable and it brings us together. And I thought, this is the direction I want to go. So, I mentioned I kind of continue to explore that whenever I could incorporate it in grad school. And I started I really considered it sort of like a passionate hobby, this food meets design thing. I started calling it Farchitecture, Food Plus Architecture, which is the name of our LLC, which confuses a lot of people. And it was like these high concept dinner parties and different products. And it was, kind of fermenting for years. And I think to Justina's point, if you kind of look back and you track the steps, all of this doesn't happen overnight, not the business growing and not even what gets you to starting the business in the first place. I think it's like this kind of internal process of kind of opening your eyes. But anyway, I was kind of going along with this like kind of passionate hobby. And then my first job after grad school was Disney Imagineering. And I started in June 2008, and the recession hit a few months later. So great timing, for starting a new job. But things were very kind of dismal at Disney at first, a lot of layoffs. And I started making what is now Coolhaus, the ice cream sandwiches from scratch, and naming the combinations after architects. And it was really just meant to lighten the mood. People were crying at their desk, oh, here's a Frank Berry, here's a Mies Vanilla Row. And I met Freya. I'd basically been doing that for 2 or 3 weeks. And Freya is my co-founder, my now wife. So, they really say you're like married to your business partner. In this case, it's very literal. But she really saw the business potential, I think, in the idea, and helped me like hone it in as a business, putting numbers to it and putting together like the most basic pro forma, nothing crazy. So, we started it together. We were 25. We just felt like we had nothing to lose. We were literally both, living at home and, had these jobs and we like say we had nothing to lose. Like we were losers, but we weren't losers. But, I think we just sort of thought, in talking about this idea, there was so much white space because, or if you looked at the ice cream brands and really any brand at that time, or really any category at that time, there just wasn't a lot of, I think, today what we expect of brands: authenticity, story, transparency in how things are made. It just felt like the same old brands that had been sitting there forever, and we didn't feel represented as, millennials, as women, as gay women. And so we really wanted to create the brand that could be, something that spoke to us. Like, why not be us? But as I mentioned, we just didn't have much to go off of. We used my personal credit card to first launch the truck that launched at Coachella. And, basically we spent no money getting there, and the brand went viral after that. So we're able to sort of take our cash flows, from Coachella and literally just get out there. And then we ran that business.
Will you tell the story about AAA in this as well? Because I think it's one of the most kind of brilliant examples of bootstrapping and just ingenuity that I've ever heard. It's
yes,
great.
Absolutely. Sorry, my son is very jealous of not being able to participate in this. So we, we started the brand. We had gotten into Coachella as our first event ever. And, we had basically begged them to let us sell there. So we got them our act together just enough for that. And we knew we wanted to basically reinvent the ice cream truck for our generation. So we had bought this like just piece of crap ice cream truck with no engine. It was really like a postal van with some stickers on it. And, we towed it from when we bought it to LA. It was $2,500, this whole truck. And it just kind of sat around. And once we were accepted at Coachella, well, great, now we can sell at Coachella. Well, the morning Coachella comes, how are we going to get the truck out there to the desert? We had figured out that if we joined AAA Platinum, we got one free 200-mile tow. So the morning of Coachella, we pretended the truck broke down, even though it never drove, and they towed us to the desert. And that is how Coolhaus began. So to the question of, startup capital, truly nothing, truly just, hacking the system. But just, the kind of the short kind of jump forward is once we had the truck business operating after Coachella, we first did a tiny friends and family round, about $30,000 to build our second truck, because our original truck was completely illegal. And we eventually got busted by, the health department. We didn't have all the right sinks in there. And I had to go to court, actually, the People versus Natasha case. And basically tell them that I would build a proper
Next big Ryan Murphy hit right there.
That's it. Exactly. Totally. So I built a proper truck. Then we found a company called Opportunity Fund. If anyone's starting a business or growing a small business out there, they are the country's biggest micro lender. They allowed us to borrow against our first trucks. We financed our second and third trucks with relatively low interest and fast loans, not payday loans, just actually very reasonable loans that way. And then, we were not able to meet the demand. So we realized, we want to kind of explore other channels. We wanted to open a flagship store, and we wanted to launch at grocery. we found an angel investor who was particularly interested in the grocery business and kind of coaching us through that. Him and his family invested $1 million that lasted us from 2011 to 2017 for a minority stake in the business. And by then we had grown the grocery business to, I think, about $3 or $4 million. And then we went out to get bigger dollars to really take this to a place where we could really market the brand, grow the brand awareness, innovate more, which we've done a ton of the past few years with novelties and dairy-free. And so we've now partnered with a private equity fund, and in total we've raised about $20 million through the private equity fund to continue to grow the brand and hopefully build it to a strategic acquisition.
That's amazing. This actually brings me to kind of the next question I had for both of you. Hearing you talk about your business, how it started, it was really out of your passions and your interest. But neither one of you came from an MBA background, and now you're scaling up. You both have booming e-commerce. You're both authors. You've really done incredible things with your business. So as you were kind of coming up, where did you look to for resources, guides? Like how did you hone in on your business acumen to really make these successful?
Natasha, do you want to go first this time?
Sure, I can go first this time, yeah. We'll trade off. Yeah, I definitely did not have the business background. However, we were talking earlier, and I just think people kind of view business as this like kind of intimidating, abstract thing. And I can see why it is to some degree. However, if you really kind of boil it down, in terms of the numbers, you're never doing math beyond multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Not really. It's getting comfortable with kind of the basics of a working business model, top and bottom line. What are your fixed costs? What are your variable costs? And I think that, you can learn these things. Like I literally read Management for Dummies when I first started Coolhaus. And I actually learned a lot of helpful things in that book, I have to say. Not all doers are great managers, for example, and managers are not always leaders. Like there's just fundamental things that are there. There's a lot of common sense baked into that. And I don't say that to sound in any way condescending to someone who feels scared about it, but more the opposite, to say, if I can do this, you can do this, And so I think like a lot of it is the willingness to be open and to learn and to think quickly and to be vulnerable and ask questions and ask people and, connect with other entrepreneurs and hear in the ways in which you're similar and different. And I think there's more resources than ever. I mean, God, when I started my business, there were no co-working spaces and Zoom chats like this. And it's just take advantage of everything's out there to just hear people's stories and what they're doing. But I do think it is important, no matter what, no matter how much you view your specialty outside of like the business realm, to be willing to understand the fundamentals, because unfortunately there are bad apples out there. And if you don't know what's going on, eventually you will get, taken advantage of, or something will go wrong and you won't be able to catch it. So, learn the basics and understand it. And then now I'm lucky enough, I have a team of about 20 people, and I have, for example, my CFO, he was the CFO of Talenti Ice Cream from when they were about our size to when they exited for $300 million. So I'm learning a ton from him, like he knows way more than I may even care to know, but I understand when we can speak the same language when it talks about the business, and then I can gather, nuggets from him. So I definitely don't think you need an MBA, definitely not to be an entrepreneur. MBAs more often end up, at bigger businesses that have that qualifier as a degree. Entrepreneurship is something that I believe, to at least to a certain degree, you have to be willing to learn from experience as you go.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think also, I mentor quite a few creatives, and just having worked in creative industries for 20 years, I see how much creatives oftentimes ruminate on ideas or things and try to perfect different things. And one thing I've noticed over the years is that, you don't really get better at doing something by thinking about it. You get better by trying things out and practicing it and jumping in and doing it. And I think that my sort of like fearlessness and just willing to try anything and test and see how people respond to this, or, test this versus this, like all that, just willingness to dive in and try something even before I think it's perfect, I think has served me very, very well. And I think this is specifically if you think of yourself as a creative. I've just seen so many people, like, for example, want to start a business. And so they spend the first 6 months like coming up with the perfect name and designing the perfect logo and like perfecting every like visual kind of touch point that the business has before you even have a business. And so whenever I'm talking to folks who are trying to get something off the ground, I'm like, look, what's your idea? Let's work on that. Let's get the operations together. Let's get the idea. Like, you can always tweak your branding and you can always tweak this and that. But I do feel like sometimes creatives lean on that as a little bit of a crutch because it's like in our comfort zone somewhat to be able to like create the perfect logo, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, sort of getting out of your head a little bit and just being like, I know this isn't perfect, but I'm going to do a soft launch of this, see how it goes, take what I've learned from that experience and then keep moving on to the next thing, you know. And what I like to say is, you know, just because you spent a really long time doing something doesn't make it any better than something that you might have done in one night. So the act of actually just like doing stuff is super important. And in today's economy and in how we're working, and especially now with all the COVID stuff, you've got to be able to work quickly and you've got to be able to do it online. And so how are you going to use technology to further your message and your brand and what you're trying to do, and what do you know and what do you not know and what do you need to learn, and then just test. And that's been really, really tried and true for me. Also, I think even more than having an MBA, what you have to be an entrepreneur is you have to have the hustle inside you. You have to have a passion for what you do because you live it. When you are an entrepreneur, you live and breathe your business. You have to love it. That's how you're able to put everything that you need to put into it. You know, I pulled, I wouldn't say an all-nighter last night, but I was up working until about 2 a.m. for a big creative meeting I have tomorrow last night. Like, I still have the hustle inside me. I still have the love and the passion for what I do. And that's why I can keep working as hard as I do. And you need to have that. If you don't have that for either your idea, for your business, then you need to think of a different idea. Or if you're not the type of person who has that kind of hustle inside you and you love it and you want to work and all that, then maybe entrepreneurship isn't for you. Maybe you're better in supporting someone else who's got an idea that you believe in. So I think that aspect of it's really important. I've never met a successful entrepreneur who hasn't worked their ass off to get where they are. It's part of the thing. It's part of what you need to succeed. You need to work hard. And you need to kind of love it a little bit.
I would say, like, when you're working, like when something's really fun, it's ironic that when something is more fun, that's actually when you work really hard. That fun and hard go together in that way. And also, just to Justina's point, it's really interesting. In business, it's so much more like what you were saying, just putting it out there, minimum viable product, versus I think coming from school is more like iterating it so many times. Sometimes you're almost, you know, working something to death, and that's a process too, and that's can be important too. But in business, minimum viable product, what is the least, you know, that can be done to this to get it out there? Because a lot of opportunities are connected to a window in time. You know, would I start the business that I started 10 years ago today? Absolutely not. So I think what really well said, Justina, and I think exactly spot on so many ways.
Well, maybe if you both can elaborate that on a little more. One of the questions that we got over and over again, I think 4 or 5 people wrote in with some variation on this question. And I think a lot of them are either recent grads from UCLA or possibly even current students. So many are saying, I'm a creative. It's really hard to focus on things. I've got all these like fantastic ideas. Where do I put my energies? How do I focus? What have you both found in terms of, you know, you're saying you have to kind of do it fast, go with it, don't overwork it. Are there other kind of tips or ways that you've maybe kind of trained yourself to get your ideas out and how to harness that creativity rather than feeling a little bit lost in it?
I I work backwards in everything that I do, macro, micro. I set these ridiculous, huge goals for myself. Like, I'm going to be the next Oprah. Let me work backwards to figure out how I'm going to do that. And so I set these huge goals, but then I also set these more micro goals for myself, which could be just for the hour or the day or the month or the year. And then I work backwards. So like, for example, when I was growing my social channels, I would say, something to the effect of, oh, I want to have 100,000 followers, on this channel by the end of this year. How many is that per day? Divided by 365, and like basically don't go to sleep that night until I've hit that number. Doing whatever I need to do. I'm engaging on other people's things. I'm sending emails to college friends and saying, can you follow me on, whatever that thing is that you need to do to make that happen. So setting those goals, breaking it up into more bite-sized pieces into what does this look like for the day. And that's still what I do now for goals around financials. I'm like, okay, this is our first year in business in the Jungalow shop. I want to make $1 million in the shop this year. That means I have to do about $2,700 a day. What does that mean? That means I need to have 30 customer, and then exactly multiplication, division, basic math, and then figuring out how to achieve those smaller goals, which all of a sudden become way less daunting it's way less daunting to say, okay, I need to find 20 customers who all want to buy a pillow today. That's not that hard. And then you do that every day and you get to your $1 million for the first year. And so that's how I focus, is by breaking up my goals into shorter term and long-term goals, and then dividing it up to see basically what my to-do list for that day is. So, okay, today I have to find get that $2,700 in the shop. Today I've got to get those 40 new followers for the Jungalow channel, and et cetera, until all of a sudden I look back 3 years later and I'm like, oh, I'm rich, or whatever it is.
From your private jet,
Yes, exactly.
That's awesome. I think, I think business and creativity is actually an essential mix. One thing I will say is I think any team, it's like it's like, what is it again? My quarantine brain, like, the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
But it's really true. It's like your team should be better as a team, like then anything they can do alone is made better because they have one another to work together. And I think I'm absolutely put in the mix on that as a leader. I have a lot of ideas all the time. Some of them are great. Some of them really are not great. And you need people around you. Like I call it, like, if I'm the dreamer, like having all the dreams, I need to be surrounded by a certain amount of dream catchers, because they will help filter through the good dreams, but filter out the bad dreams, and that's good. And that's okay. And that's what you need. However, I do think, like being an idea factory can be like, I think that can be great for business, because you do need kind of a constant, like constantly evolving, or constantly looking at what's there. You're constantly looking at problems. It's not only about like a visually creative thing. It's like, what are like the ways in which I solve this business problem, like towing a truck to a music festival. I mean, that it's creativity, it's thinking outside the box. So it's bigger than kind of even any one skill. And I think a lot of people have like, identity issues with like business and creative. And I think for me, even, I think I was hesitant to be boxed in as the creative at my company, especially as we were growing. Like, no, I'm on the business side, understand everything that's going on. But now I realize, like, why would you ever take creativity for granted? Because it can be very rarefied in a business setting, like being like really just willing to be authentically weird and take those risks and have strange, just like radical ideas, but have the pieces around you to help set them up for success and help make those real and put numbers behind them and put goals behind them. I think that's like can be a secret sauce. So like trying to reconcile and bring that creativity in and really like let it like lead with it and let it guide and I think and like let it inspire, like, just own that and don't try to shy away because you're in a business setting, is really important too. So I think it's actually an amazing mix. And I think these days is like there's so much kind of crossover with so many different kinds of media and how we use our skill sets. Now a better time than ever to really to merge those two things.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all that. And one of the things I love most about being a creative entrepreneur is that I really don't feel like I have to focus sort of on what's in front of me at any given moment. But I love that I really get to be interdisciplinary. I really get to do so many different types of things in a given day. I might be designing product. I might be designing a campaign for a marketing thing that we're doing. I get to set up photo shoots for Instagram. Like there's just so many different ways that my creativity is expressed. And then the business side is also very creative. And so really, like Natasha said, just leaning into that creativity and not being too worried that your attentions are going to be too bifurcated, but instead just sort of letting your creativity guide you and lead you. And then, yes, focusing on what's in front of you. That's really important. Set those goals, meet those goals. But besides that, your creativity is your greatest asset. So leaning into that, embracing that, and celebrating that, that's what's going to make you stand out as an artist. That's why I stand out. That's why, because I'm an artist. And then on top of that, I'm also an entrepreneur, and that is special. That's something that not everybody has.
And you, Justina, your undergrad, you really designed your own curriculum, right?
I did.
So you kind of show that you were an entrepreneur from the get-go in doing that.
I guess I didn't think of it that way while I was doing it, but I've always, I don't know if it's because of my multiracial background or what, but I've always like avoided checking boxes. I don't like fitting inside of a specific area. I want to like look and see what's above and below and all around the box and what's inside the box and outside the box. So yeah, I designed my own curriculum within the World Arts and Cultures department. I don't know if they still have it, but they had an honors major when I was there, where you could have a faculty member kind of guide you and I designed my own major, and it was art and social change. And so in that, I got to really kind of dig in and take classes in departments that I might not have otherwise been able to, and kind of scam the system a tiny bit to be able to do what I want. And I haven't stopped doing that 20 years later. I'm still doing that.
Okay, so I'm thinking about both of your businesses and the time that they were kind of launched. You both mentioned 2008, 2009, when we were post-recession, very slightly post-recession. And again, bringing this to the current moment, with the economic crisis that we're facing as a result of COVID-19, they seem like very kind of parallel moments. Are there lessons that you can think back on now that maybe could be applied? Are there opportunities that you were able to harness because it was a financially insecure time? Do you see kind of a parallel between the two?
100%. I think, when you don't have the option to just, go to a bank and get a small business loan, or money isn't flowing everywhere, is when the actual idea and the actual essence of what you're doing is even more key. And it's going to take that true humble beginning and building it from nothing. It speaks to the quality of the idea, and also the willingness and the grit of the people behind it to see it through, that there is something really meaningful there. And I think oftentimes, it's in hard times and things kind of go, bananas, and the dust settles, and the brands that are either, founded out of a new ethos of what that time means, like Justina mentioned, just how much you have to be willing to embrace tech first, and how fast you have to be able to move. Whatever it is, kind of understanding of that moment and embracing it and running with it, or a business that's willing to kind of evolve and pivot smartly. Those are the ones coming out of the dust that will become the household names of tomorrow. And I think those trying times really force you to like self-examine and to think and make sure that you're really optimized. I think having a recession-founded business, like, you never lose that grit and that hustle and that willingness to like find a way to not just need tons of money to make an idea happen. I think it definitely stays with you. There's just a realness to all of it. And I think having businesses that, really thinking about like, look, no one could have, predicted that this would be the kind of the ebb and flow. But really every decade there's, you know, recessions that come out of these booms. And are you prepared? What are the recession proof, you know, components of your business? You know, for me, ice cream is a bit of a boomer bust. Like you could have a terrible day and just want to eat a pint of ice cream, or you could be celebrating something, you're having an ice cream sandwich, and it's an affordable luxury. You know, you're spending $5 to $10. You know, you may not be able to go on that vacation, but you can have ice cream and you can have that momentary escape. And I think that's really, really important to know and understand about the experience and how we're speaking to our customer and how we deliver to them. So, you know, thinking about that, like what are going to be the pieces in hard times, because this is going to come up and down. That's just the way it is. So it's when things started kind of, you know, falling apart in March, you know, Freya and I, it's funny because we sort of looked at each other. It was like, even though it was really scary, I think I felt kind of in my element because it reminded me of what it took to start this business, and that nothing would stop us from making sure people still got the best ice cream in their hands, no matter, you know, what illness was, you know, keeping people at home and whatnot. And, you know, so far we have been able to do that. We are actually growing in these times, thanks to being in grocery stores and being diversified. So there's a will, there's a way. And I absolutely think it's a actually smart way to really, to vet your own business and make sure that you're set up for times like these.
I will say one of our participants, Arti Sakara, just said that ice cream sandwich has been a winner during quarantine for all of us. So everyone is on board with the ice cream luxury right now. And Justina, what about you and Jungalow?
Yeah, so, you know, I think flexibility is always going to be key in business, and finding kind of hidden opportunities where you might not otherwise see them is also going to be a huge asset. And I've always been a kind of a glass half full type of person, but I do feel that these trying times for so many also do provide certain opportunities, and it is important to look at those opportunities and say, okay, well, given that this is the situation right now for X amount of time, how can I actually like lean into this shitty situation, right? So, you know, for me, that could mean any number of things, but it is about being flexible and, as Natasha said, being diversified. So people are staying at home now. People are working from home now. How can your business potentially benefit from that? How can you think about that? And how is it potentially leveling the playing field for you and your business, given that, you know, it might have been the case that you were up against competitors who had huge photo studios and 20 people to do styling, or, you know, and coming out with these immaculate photos. And now everyone's trying to create content from home. And maybe you've been creating content from home for the past 5 years. So maybe you're already really good at it. And so how can you, you know, take this experience and kind of pivot it or look at it from a slightly different perspective, and then be able to, do what you can to kind of work with it and not look at it as just a purely, you know, a detriment to a business. You know, you really have to be able to see the good in all situations, even when situations are really, really difficult. I also think as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, you have to have a little bit of an ability, or at least to psych yourself out to think you have an ability to like look in the crystal ball and see a little bit about what's going to happen in the future. And once you start making guesses and you know, turning different dials to say like, okay, I'm going to guess that this is going to be a work from home situation for until June of next year. What does that mean for me and my business? And really like thinking about it in those terms so that you can diversify and weather these kinds of storms. You know, this is a difficult situation. I have my studio that's been sitting virtually empty now for 5 months, and my lease is coming up soon, and I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do with my studio space. So it's not to say I haven't come up against challenges, but it's really about how you look at them and how you kind of can foresee different avenues for your future and then plan accordingly to be able to weather these kinds of storms.
Do either of you, on that crystal ball tip, either of you any predictions, either in your respective fields or kind of in the creative industries in general, where we might go either as a result of the pandemic or also thinking about the national shift in consciousness around social equity and social justice in these conversations that we're having?
Yeah, one of the things that I mentioned to you guys last week on the call, but it's interesting to see how different personality types or different people who might not excel in a traditional work environment where it's in person, maybe someone's a little more introverted or something along those lines. Perhaps when all of a sudden everything is online and it's really more about email communication or Slack or whatever it is that you use to communicate in your office, there are maybe certain personality types that are really going to excel in that environment that don't excel in the in-person environment. So I think that's a kind of unique and interesting way to think about how the playing field is going to be leveled. And I think that that also could have very interesting ramifications as far as social justice goes, because there's so much, I think, in traditional corporate environments, sort of nepotism and the buddy thing, and you look like me, and so we're together in this boardroom, and da 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 da, and so many other types of people, whether it's Black folks or LGBTQ folks or whoever it is who are being left behind. And so I'm really interested to see how this plays out in that corporate world, to see if this really does change sort of how people work together, how people come up through the ranks in different companies, and what kind of transformation we're going to be seeing.
Yes, the crystal ball. And very true. I think, I mean, your intuition just has to be, a lot of this is just going to be instinctive intuition. But I guess this is a bit specific to being in the food space. Like, I do not think we will go back to restaurants and bars the way we knew them for a very, very long time, or maybe ever. And, look, there's some interesting good that can come. I don't mean to say that that's all shut down, but I think there's some interesting good that can come from that. For example, all these kind of urban planning concepts around using sidewalk and street space to dine, which looks and feels amazing, and feels much more, especially in LA, better use of our outdoor space. We completely take our outdoor space for granted. We don't celebrate it. I think we're picky. Freya, I know, like, if it's 1 degree too hot or too cold, like, she's not eating outside. Like, come on, like, let's. So I think like there's some major changes to think about, especially in like the hospitality space. And so for us, a couple of things are, one, that specifically impacts like our truck business. It's hard to imagine hundreds of people lining up at a truck for a hand scooped ice cream sandwich, right now. Like, maybe we could get back to that, but in the meanwhile, and I think we will, but it could be a long time. So in the meanwhile, how do we take like these special experience of a brand like Coolhaus and bring it to you in a way that does feel like this really kind of intimate thing, and also feels shareable? Because I think that's something that's important always, about those truck events. Like, there's something that people want to document, and it's fun, and it's sort of this fantasy thing of coming to the ice cream truck. So we've been working on like ideas for like kits to like, celebrate different moments that people would normally book a truck for, but they can have this whole amazing looking experience that comes to their door. We did a really cool kit for this Pride SKU that we did, that was called Enjoyment for All. And it was this dairy-free, like mint cookie marshmallow, colorful, pint. And we sent out like float kits, because we said parades, all the Pride parades are canceled. Doesn't mean you can't have a float at home. So it was like a soda float, and so it's at home and you're in a small group, but that's something special, and we're all in this together. So I think that's going to be really important. And I also think there was a model that we had already started working with our shops called Cloud Kitchens, which are like these virtual restaurant spaces. So they're touchless, they're restaurants that really only exist as a brand, like on a Postmates app. But you wouldn't really know the difference. Some of them have beautiful branding and design and well thought out menus, but they can be very tech first, and they can create menus that they know people in that neighborhood they're looking to satisfy, get like whatever kind of sandwich that they can't get otherwise. And this is the time of day that they eat it. You can really optimize. And I think that model is definitely something that was already starting and now is just completely accelerating. So a lot of these things were kind of already in place to some degree. And now it's just like they've taken off way faster than we ever could have known. And like, as Justina said, you have to lean into those and really like place your bets there. And I think build, just commit and build strategies around those.
Great. Well, I'm looking at the time. We have so many good questions coming in, some really kind of interesting, amazing ones. But I wanted to quickly see, do either of you have questions for each other, entrepreneur to entrepreneur? Anything you want to ask each other?
I can ask one, Justina. It's kind of in the vein of the last Jane's last question as well. Is that cool if I
Yeah.
share mine with you? Well, yeah, I think, I think we actually have so many funny things in common, like the Italian and I mean, just many. But something I think that we do share too is like businesses can do a greater good than, our P&Ls. Like I was looking at all you've done around, planting trees and using also, agriculture and helping to support it and what it does to to regenerate business and build income and create supply that people then can build other businesses around. And it's so amazing. And I really, really admire it. And you've just been doing this the whole time as you've been growing your business. And my question to you is like, do you think that businesses can solve, we have all these, kind of there's so many, major issues to solve right now around inequality and around the environment. Like, do you think that as businesses, okay, I think we've said it's our responsibility that we can solve these problems if businesses decide to do it, like specifically, and even small businesses, just speaking for small businesses, if we all say we're going to commit to this greater good, can we actually save the environment, for example?
I think we can, and I think we need to. I know we're all moms on this call. I'm stressed. I'm stressed about the environment. I'm laughing, but I'm crying. I do, and it's honestly something that I struggle with as an entrepreneur every single day, because as someone who develops products and sends things in cardboard and packaging and styrofoam and all this stuff, we are working hard to make our business sustainable. And one thing that is really challenging that I would not have known on sort of the other side, because when you're looking at businesses, it's like, why is it so hard for that to be organic cotton? Why can't you just make it organic? Why can't you just, make that out of bamboo instead of, plastic? Or from the outside, it really does seem simple. But one thing that I've noticed, especially in the last 3 or 4 years since we've started developing our own products as well, is that there's so many choices that you have to make, and there's oftentimes compromises that you have to make. So one example is I really wanted our bedding to be organic. I really wanted to have organic fill for the quilts and organic outside. And if you want the fill to be organic with the factories that we work with, the bedding becomes dry clean only. And so then we're in the office, we're like, okay, raise your hand if you'd rather have an organic bedding that's dry clean only, or a non-organic cotton bedding that you can wash in the washing machine. And it's there's always some amount of give and take, and that's multiply that times 100 decisions a day, right? So I do think as a business, I really, really admire businesses that are really able to take extreme steps in the way of sustainability and, B corporations, companies that give back. That's always sort of been my aim with Jungalow, is to have that, even just for myself, because that's what I want. That's what I believe in. And we're learning, we're still small and we're still growing and still doing a lot of trial and error, but yes, give back component to me is really important. I don't want to feel like I'm adding to trash on earth. I don't want to feel that way. I love my business. I love designing products. I love helping people make their homes more beautiful and more of a place where they feel like they can grow and they can be their best selves. That's really my passion. But I also am really trying hard to figure out how to do that without shitting on Mother Earth. And it's hard. So right now we're balancing that by planting trees for every single purchase that is made. Actually, not just purchase, but anytime you buy a product, any product. So if you buy 10 products on Jungalow, we plant 20 trees. So we're really working hard to, offset right now, you know, and I, in the next 5-10 years, I hope to make that even more, because Jungalow is, as a brand, it's all about the human nature connection and what that means for our homes, and how nature in our homes can make our spaces more healthy and better for humans as well. So yeah, I'm really hoping to be able to grow that area of my business. I think I'm kind of disgusted actually with so many of these businesses that, like, the only thing that's important is money. I get to a point and I'm just like, I don't get that. Money is important. I live in LA. I know how important money is. You know, I want to have a beautiful quality of life, but not at the expense of like my daughter needing to wear a gas mask in 20 years or whatever, you know? So I do think that there really needs to be a huge mindset shift when it comes to business owners, and it would be so nice if that was also the case sort of along the whole line, you know, from package, because in order to make your business sustainable, you know, we work with, let's say, 100 other businesses. And so it has to be sustainable everywhere, because otherwise it's like we're just spinning our wheels here. So yeah, that was a little long-winded, but it is something I'm really passionate about, and something I feel frustrated around, because I'm not meeting the goals that I want to meet, because I keep on meeting these different challenges in this arena. But yeah, I think that that's going to be an area that I continue to work really hard at. Yeah, and I've got a question for you. My question is very different, but I'm just so fascinated with your design food intersection. And I love that you studied like at Berkeley and at UCLA and studied architecture. And I guess I'm curious, sort of now where you are, if you're with your business, if you could go back to school and do a year, now what you would study.
Ooh, a good one. I think that something I started to do a little bit of at the end of getting my degree at UCLA was doing more in kind of like the design media arts at the media lab, doing like a computer animation. We were starting to do Maya in studio more, but then I started to do some more kind of building video, and it was much more specialized back then. I think there are more and more tools. Like my mom is an animator actually, lifelong Disney, and now she's actually on American Dad, which she loves. Which animation, talk about also a at-home proof business. Like they make animated shows for days. So she just can't believe if you know, I ever send her like an Instagram story video that someone made. She's like, how did someone make this? Wow. You know, because like these were things that were very like rarefied skills, you know, 10 years ago, to be able to build video like that. But I think I would like to do anything kind of around understanding and being able to really integrate the technology. Even though it is more accessible now, I still think the more you could know that I could know around it, around the computer science side, I think I would love to really embrace. And then I think on the other side would be just like, you know, when you get older, you look back at your years in school and you're like, oh, I could have just done all this. It could have just been so cool, all this stuff for fun, because it's hard when you're younger, it's harder to appreciate everything that a school has to offer. And that's okay. And that's normal. But you get older, you're like, oh, I could also done like this cool language. And, you know, so I think part of it would just be like kid in a candy store. You know, I think like I'm so interested in agriculture. It would have been cool to go into like do something in agriculture sciences and just have fun in a lot of different areas, just because UCLA does have so much. But I think from like a serious standpoint, like anything around kind of like the technology and computer sciences, I think it would only just be beneficial, especially now, to know as much as possible.
Definitely.
Great question, yeah.
Those are really good questions. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask just one more, maybe a quick question to both of you. Right now, we've had a few questions coming up about work-life balance, quality of life. You know, what are you both doing right now in your personal lives to kind of adjust to the pandemic these times? Both mentioned we're all parents here. You know, what's kind of going on for you personally? What's sustaining you? Justina, I saw on your Instagram those amazing washes you've been doing, which are so beautiful. But yeah, I'd just love to hear what you're doing to stay sane these days.
I think my background kind of says a lot. about, you know, I have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old. But I think, you know, Freya and I are both full-time back to work. You have to celebrate the wins. Like Remy is, and my older son is in preschool because they were able to open in a way that, you know, anything is a risk, but he's there with 3 other kids, max, in his pod. So we sort of said, you know, it's such a small group and we are close with our Happy Land is the name of the school community. And so, you know, trust the community to remain quarantined, and socialization is so important for a kid his age. So we do have him there, which has been a huge help since we've both been back at work. And then we have actually at our house, we have like an ADU in the back, and Freya's mom is here 3 days a week, even though she's the busiest retired person that I've ever seen. So she does, you know, she jumps in, she's amazing. And my older son, our son loves to have sleepovers at our house. So, you know, we do have breaks, but I think the biggest thing that keeps us going is just a lot of communication. Like, what are you doing tomorrow? At what times? What are the absolute musts, like where you need to be in charge? We're like planning meals so much more than we ever used to. What are we ordering and when, and what day is it coming? So I think there's just a lot around communication. And then just, you know, doing your best to shut it off. I definitely have some days, it's weird because you think working at home, like you'd be way ahead of like email, for example. I really believe email is like other people's to-do list for you. It's not your to-do list. So what I try to do is like, what are my actual things I have to get done today that are really specific to me, not just get lost in the zone of email. Okay, maybe I still have 100 right now. I'll get to that. It will be okay. It will happen. Someone will call me if it's really urgent. So like, what are the things that like the projects, and this was kind of like to the earlier point about just creativity. I think as creatives, like we don't want to be just answering emails all day. Like take time to like make your stuff, you know, and work on your stuff. I try to always like kind of balance the day with that. And then last thing I'll say is just like, I try to be outside as much as possible. I find that really helps me. I am away and more outside. I feel like I'm like tanner now than I've been years. So, you know, taking walks and enjoying like that at home, you can seamlessly go outside and be in the fresh air. It makes it, you know, kind of keeps it all together. So.
Great.
Yeah, definitely. Also me too, trying to spend as much time outside, just in the fresh air as possible. It's mostly just in my front or backyard, but I'll take it. It's still really nice to be outside. I also try and engage in a lot of creative activities that are non-work related. So whether that's playing music, I play the guitar and I sing. We do that like as a family. My daughter plays the drums, my husband plays a bunch of different instruments. So we have like different jam sessions and a little like partridge family situation or whatever. And then I paint, I try and paint, or at least do some kind of like off computer artwork every single day. And I usually try and do at least an hour of that. And that's up from what was used to be 15 minutes before COVID. I used to try and do creative warm-ups in the morning. Now I've extended that time and it's been really great for me. I actually feel like I'm having a little bit of like a creative like moment for myself, which is really, really lovely. And I'm also trying to read more and just do more like journaling, again, just like off-screen activities, because I do think it's really easy to spend so much time in front of the computer right now, and I do not think it's healthy. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is not like, I'm normally not like a person to preach this kind of stuff, but I really do feel like physical exercise and activity has been a really important part of my mental health right now. So I do a workout with my sister and a trainer and a few other women 3 mornings a week. And it's just been like a great time to connect with my friends and my sister and work out and like sweat. And, you know, it's so easy for me to just like sit in this chair all day, you know, and I have a million Zoom calls and emails and all that stuff. And that really could very easily be my life right now. So I really have to make this like very conscious effort to have regular routines and things that I can't say no to, like things that are scheduled and I may be paying someone to help us with it or something like that, so that there's some level of accountability with it, so that I stick to these routines with my physical workout and my music and my art and getting outside and getting sunshine and fresh air. And then I've also been moving my office around in my house, which is nice for me to change up like the view outside the windows and different noise levels or different levels of interaction with my family that's here, and just changing things up a little bit so it doesn't feel too monotonous. And sometimes I'll just take my laptop and work outside in my yard. And so, yeah, it's been hard for sure. The hardest part for me has just been, feeling isolated for sure, but then also just my daughter is an only child, and that's just been difficult. She's almost 8 years old, and just having no interaction with any other kids for the past 5 months. I mean, I'm like almost crying just thinking about it, because it's pretty brutal, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, just trying to channel the gratitude, because we are in a very fortunate you know, situation, high level. So yeah, that's it. Meditating, you know, and just trying to stay creative and off the screen when I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to both of you, Justina and Natasha, for joining us for this conversation. There was so many great things you said, and I feel like we could probably keep going on and on. More people are asking questions. But I'll end it here and just thank you again so much. And this talk will be available on the UCLA Arts YouTube page, and we'll send out a link to it later. So thank you everyone for attending, for the great questions you put in the chat. And thank you again to Justina Blakeney and Natasha Case.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thanks, Natasha. It was great talking to you both. Thanks, everyone out there.
Wow.
Bye.